Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Anthony Luscre, Kilo 8 Zulu Tango, and tonight's topic is 10-meter band fun for all. It's my contact information, k8zt at gmail73@gmail.com, my website, k8zt.com. And if you've ever been at any of my presentations before, you know that I always have homework. And to get to that homework, you're going to want this link right here, this link, tiny.cc/10mband, or shoot the QR code. I'll have this up again at the end of the slideshow if you miss it now. But this will give you access to all the resources in the slideshow. Whenever you see this serif font or this little symbol, that means that there's a link you can click on for more information in the slideshow. So tonight we want to talk about maximizing your on-air experience, maximize use of the current privileges by exploring the 10-meter HF band. This is a new band for many people. We're climbing up in the sunspot cycle here, and a couple of years ago it was pretty dead. Also explore new modes. If you're a technician, this is a chance to get on single sideband on HF, maybe work some FT8 or other digital modes on HF, and explore new activities and have more fun, hopefully. Good. So everything there's a season. Which tomatoes do you prefer? Homegrown local summer tomatoes or commercially grown and shipped winter tomatoes? I think we all sort of prefer these summer tomatoes. And what happens is 10 meters is very similar. During high sunspot activity, it's bursting with worldwide communication possibilities. During sunspot lulls, it's rather blah with limited QSOs. There is a third option, just like there is with tomatoes, and that is sporadic E-skip. It provides a semi-decent hothouse type tomato, and it occurs at any time, so you don't have to wait for the sunspot cycle. But the problem is we don't really know when it's going to happen, and we don't know if it's going to be good as those summer tomatoes. So a lot of us don't get on 10 meters until we know that the sunspots have really started to crank up. So the current situation of hams in the United States, and I also have Ohio here because I've done this presentation a number of times in Ohio. If you look at the total, 51% of the hams are either technicians or legacy novice hams licensees with the same privileges as the technicians. And let's talk a little bit about the privileges you get with the novice and technician licenses. Most techs limit their operations to VHF, UHF, repeaters, and occasionally simplex FM. Many get their license, but they fail to get on the air or get on and burn out rather quickly. Some upgrade their license so they have many more privileges, but many do not. Some drop out of amateur radio completely. Earlier novice and tech licensees on air activity typically included HF contacts in the CW subbands on 80, 40, 15, and 10 meters. Tech enhancement added 10-meter phone and data privileges, but this band is highly dependent on sunspot activity and thus is often limited to only local contacts. This novice enhancement occurred in March of 1987, so 36 years ago. And you can read the whole article again. As I said, whenever you see this font, you can click on that for more information. You can read the QST article from 1987. This provided 10-meter privileges of both data and phone. Now, these are the original privileges here. It's now expanded. It's all the way 28.0 to 28.3, CW and data modes, 28.3 to 28.5, voice, but with single sideband only. A couple gotchas with the enhancement. The whole band is not available to technicians, and privileges only include single sideband, not AM or FM. Power was also limited to 200 watts, but that's not really an issue for most beginners. And on 10 meters, 200 watts is more than you really need most of the time. There were a couple other changes that happened, and this consolidated some things, getting rid of the novice license, moving those people to technician class licenses. The 5-word per minute code was completely dropped the code was reduced to 5 words per minute in 1999 and dropped completely in February of 2007. So there are no code requirements. And this is the current situation with the novice privileges. CW 80, 40, and 15 is the only HF available in these bands with CW. On 10 meters, the only other HF band the technicians have privileges on, data CW on the lower part of the band, and voice 28.3 to 28.5. Some myths of the technician license: VHF, UHF repeaters are the only activity. There are no HF privileges. And as I've just been mentioning, there definitely are HF privileges, but most of the technicians do not take advantage of them. People think that only code experts can make CW contacts. There's no way to work DX. 6 and 10 meters are always dead. And you can't work FT8 or FT4. And we'll go through and disprove many of those things as we go through tonight. So there's other things you can do with your technician license, but that's beyond tonight's. I have a whole presentation, technicians beyond local repeaters, with other things you can do. But tonight we're going to focus on one thing, and that is 10-meter activity for technicians and other licensees. FT8 and FT4 are the fastest growing amateur radio mode, with good weak signal, even with poor antennas, poor propagation, etc. Techs do have privileges on for FT8 on 10 meters. That's the only HF band. They also have them on 6 meters and above, but we're going to focus on HF tonight. One of the most common violations that the FCC is sending out pink slips for is technicians operating FT8, but the problem is they're operating them on 40 or 80 meters where they have no privileges, thinking that they do have privileges there because they have CW privileges. That's not the case. FT8 and FT4 and other digital modes for technicians are only available on 10 meters and higher frequencies. I have a whole presentation on FT8 and FT4. So you can also do other digital sound card modes. And we're going to skip over parts of this. But basically, by having your radio equipped with a sound card capability, you can install software and do FT8, FT4, all these WSJTX modes, plus a bunch of other digital and non-digital modes using FL Digi. These are all free software packages. If you're involved in emergency communication and you want to add things like WinLink, VARA, and other things, you need to install a piece of purchase software called the VARA software-based modem, and that will allow you to do an additional thing. So having your computer ready with a sound card will let you do all these digital modes with 10 meters and above as a technician. When 10 meters is open, when the ionosphere becomes ionized due to sunspot activity, solar activity, it provides potential worldwide communication. And very easily you can communicate around the world. When the sunspot numbers are low, it's pretty much the doldrums. You might make local contacts, but that's about it, unless you get some sporadic E. And I do have a whole presentation here on working with sporadic E on 10 meters, 12 meters, and 6 meters with FT8. You can read that by clicking on the link. But the good news is the sunspot activity has been way up. Here's the sunspot numbers progression. The red line is the predicted value. The black line is the numbers smoothed over a couple day period here. And you can see we went way up at the beginning of the year. We've dropped down a little bit in March, but we're still way above the predicted amount. And you'll notice that we're about 18 months ahead of the schedule here. So it's the time to get on 10 meters. We're probably going to see about 3 years of good propagation on 10 meters, maybe up to 5, but get on now. Don't wait until it starts going down and down and down and down. The ARRL propagation forecast bulletin from January 20th basically said, wow, this could get us to the 1957-59 levels last seen in solar cycle 19. So that's some wishful thinking. We don't know whether that'll happen or not, but the whole thing I can say is, wow, the propagation has been great. So in the first month of January, from my station running 5 watts, that's all I run here. I do have a beam, but I'm running 5 watts on 10 meters, small beam. I worked 92 countries on 10 meters in January. That was before any contest came around. By the middle of February, I was up to 101 countries, still no contest. So this is pre-contest. Then the ARRL DX contest came around. The CW version was in late February. I worked 82 countries in that 13 hours that I worked that contest on 10 meters. Since then, up until yesterday, I have worked 134 DX countries on 10 meters only. using my 5 watts. And these are some of the countries I've worked. So some really nice DX, such as JT1 in Mongolia, FK in New Caledonia, China. Yesterday I was on 10 meter FT8. I was calling CQ and I had 2 Chinese stations come back to me and call me. So this is the kind of stuff that's out there available on 10 meters in 73 days. So almost an average of almost 2 new countries a day. So maybe I've sold you on 10 meters. I hope I have. And you say, okay, Anthony, I'm ready to get on 10 meters. So you get on the internet and you type in 10 meter radio because you want to buy a 10 meter radio and get on the air. And you say, well, look at all these radios I'm finding. Most of the things you're going to find in the first part of the search are what I'm going to refer to as CB vendor radios. These radios are advertised as 10 meters. They do operate on 10 meters, but they're really designed with CB features for the most part. And when you read the ads, you'll start seeing that. And you'll see things like this. Oh, here, $2.99. This would be great. The problem is this particular radio only operates on AM. What did I say about novice technician privileges on 10 meter? Single sideband only. So this particular radio won't do you any good, neither will this one or this one or this one. All these radios do not operate on single sideband. Now you might say, Anthony, I found a great radio that does operate on single sideband, and this is a good radio. You can use it on 10 meters just fine, but you're going to see that most of the features are really designed for the CB band. It's channelized. You get a Roger beep. There's squelch, which is pretty ineffective on single sideband. There's no antenna tuner, no ability to do a computer interface between your radio and your computer for logging, no digital sound card, and it doesn't provide 6 meters or other bands that you could use as a technician or when you upgrade to general. Now, this particular model you can get with both 10 and 12 meters. 12 meters is not available for technicians, but you might be able to use that if you have a general class or higher. And this might be a nice radio to throw in your car. You can get these fairly inexpensively when they're on sale. But I suggest instead you really probably want to look at a real ham transceiver that includes 10 meter single sideband, which you can often buy cheaper used or older equipment to get on the air. Most of the ham multi-band HF transceivers cover 160 through 10 meters, and most of them also include 6 meters. So you would be getting 6 meters, which you could use immediately as a tech, and other bands you could use when you upgrade to general or higher. Newer model radios may also make the use of FT8 and FT4 easier with built-in sound cards. So let's look at a little comparison here. Let's go to our local CB vendor here and buy the Galaxy 100 single sideband 10 meter radio. This is $479. It includes 10 meters and you can modify it. Oh, guess what? You can modify it to operate on 11 meters by holding down a couple little buttons. It does put out 100 watts. You can't do CW with it. It doesn't have the ability to do computer interfacing, no built-in antenna tuner, no built-in sound card, no band map or waterfall display, but it does have a Roger beep, so you can use that feature. Here's another one, the one I was showing earlier, the Lincoln 2, $319, a little bit less, and I've actually seen this one for $269. 10 meters and 12 meters and 11 meters. Power output's 28 watts. By the way, that's more than enough power to start making contacts on 10 meters. You don't necessarily need 100 or 1,000 watts. 28 watts will be perfectly fine. Again, no CW, no CAT, no tuner, but it does have a Roger beep. Now, instead, we might go and buy an amateur radio with 10 meters. The Yaesu FT819 is about the same size or a little bit smaller than these CBs. It runs 100 watts. It is a little bit more money. It's $639 new, but it covers all of these bands, 6, which is available to technicians, 10, which is available to technicians, and all these other bands you can use as a general class operator. It does have the ability to do CW and other digital modes. You can interface it with your radio and with your computer. It does not have a built-in antenna tuner. It does not have a built-in sound card. It does have a rudimentary band map waterfall, but it's very rudimentary. And it doesn't have a Roger beep, unfortunately. Now, instead, you might go for the popular ICOM 7300, a base station. Again, a little more money, $1,099 that you can get it for. It's typically, I think the list price is $1,300, but it's usually available for $1,099. Again, all these bands are covered, 100 watts of power, CW, CAT, built-in antenna tuner, built-in sound card, so you can immediately get on FT8 and FT4 very easily, and a beautiful full-color band map waterfall that people really fall in love with, but it does not have a Roger beep, so I'm sorry about that. Or you might go for a Chinese import such as the Xiegu G90. This is a $490 radio. I've actually seen it as cheap as $450 on sale. 25 watts, but it covers all these bands, including 10 meters. No 6 meters, but again, CW, CAT computer control, built-in antenna tuner. Does not have a built-in sound card, but you can buy a little accessory box that comes with it for, I think, about 50 bucks. It plugs into it and gives you a sound card capability. It does have a intermediate type of band map to it. It's not quite as nice as the ICOM 7300, but it is a nice little waterfall display. Or you might want to go out in the used market and have a wide variety of choices available for HF radios, anywhere from $300, and I haven't seen them lower, but we'll say that you're looking at one that's in good shape cosmetically and working condition. $300 to $900, you can easily buy a radio that's 100 watts. It'll probably have computer interface capability, probably have a built-in antenna tuner. It may or may not have a built-in sound card depending on how old it is, and it may or may not have a built-in band map. But there's a whole bunch of possibilities out there, so I would not limit yourself to these type of radios, especially the ones you can't use at all anyway. I have a whole presentation on buying amateur radio equipment. You can click on this link and view it. I also have a spreadsheet. I'll click on one of these links to prove that they really work. This particular spreadsheet lists a matrix of called HF rig matrix at the bottom here on this tab. It lists HF radios that are currently in production or have recently been discontinued. And when you go through this list, you can click on the link for more information on each of the radios, the style, whether it's a base, mobile, or portable, what bands it covers, whether it includes 6 meters, whether it includes 2 meters and 70 centimeters, if it has a built-in antenna tuner, and what the tuning ratio is, what type of CAT or computer interface it has, sound card built in, CW decode capability, and list price and or use prices, and more information. So you can see there's a bunch of different radios available on this. You can also click on the HF tab and it'll show you radios available from the last 20 or 30 years. So you can, if you see a radio that's used and you're interested in it, there's also HF, there's also VHF and UHF radios on here, manufacturers, dealers that sell different brands, etc. So if you're buying a radio and you need help, slideshow will tell you a lot about buying it, both new and used radios, and where you can buy them. And the spreadsheet will help you with information on each of the different models. You will need an antenna for your 10-meter radio. The great news is there's a wide variety of choices out there. You can put up a simple dipole, a vertical, either a single band or multi-band vertical, a mobile vertical. Often mag mounts mobile CB antennas that have been retuned are available very easily. A simple beam, a 2-element Moxon or a 3-element Yagi are very inexpensive and easy to put up, or maybe a multi-band beam. The good news is that the antennas on 10 meters are the smallest of all antennas that you use for HF. Because of the higher frequency, the shorter wavelength, that means that the antennas are typically small. A dipole is approximately 16.5 feet total. Also, many CB antennas can be retuned. You might pick up a CB beam or a vertical or a mobile antenna and easily retune it for 10 meters. And because there's so many of them out there, they can be found very inexpensively, both new and in the used market. For ground wave contacts, polarization can affect the signal. So the typical thing that hams do on 10 meters is we use horizontal polarization. The good news is that's not going to matter for these worldwide contacts. It does not matter whether your antenna is horizontally polarized or vertically polarized if you're bouncing the signal off the F layer, because it gets spun all around on its way up and down anyway. It is important if you're trying to make 30-mile distance ground wave contacts, both of you want the same polarization. So easiest antenna to start out with, make a simple dipole, cut 2 pieces of wire 8 foot 3 inches, use a center conductor insulator. I like to use cheap dollar store cutting boards, very easy to work with. The plastic is a good insulator, and for $1, you can build all 3 of these insulators and have them ready. You can even mount this so that the coax is strapped down onto the insulator, and you can have an integrated insulator coax holder on there using a simple cutting board material. You need a coax to run to the transceiver. By the way, this little chart here gives you an idea. On 10 meters, if you're at the low end of the band, it's 8.4 feet. If you're on the high end of the band, which is the FM portion of the band, 7.9 feet. So notice there's not a lot of difference, and most radios don't have a problem, even if you cut something in the middle. If you go in the middle, you're going to be just fine. So small Yagis and quads are very easily turned with TV rotors, and you can use simple mast and mounts that you would use for any TV antenna installation. And 10-meter beams are even practical for portable operations or stealth installations where you need to take the antenna up and down very quickly. I have a whole presentation on antennas that I've originally created for field day for use for people in our club. So it's called portable antennas, but it actually goes into a lot more information, gives you pluses and minuses, pros and cons of different types of antennas. And then after that, there's information on each of the types of antennas, including articles, YouTubes, information on building your own antenna, and in some cases, even commercial antennas. So you see the little commercial here saying that there's some commercial ones available. And there's sections on different antennas, and there's even a section on 10-meter antennas right here. So you can use this information when you're building an antenna or buying an antenna. Here's the privileges on 10 meters. Now, just a reminder, we have privileges that are granted us by our license level, but then there's also gentlemen's agreements or gentlewomen's agreements called considerate operators guides. So even though we could use FT8 at any point in this data section of the band from 28.0 to 28.299, we have a designated frequency where we find other FT8 operators. So using FT8 up here would be kind of foolish, especially on top of the beacons. So we have, by license, you can use this portion of the band for these modes. By license, you can use this portion of the band for these modes, but by considered operate, we choose to use the band for different segments for different modes. It makes it a lot easier. So here's the guide. This is where you'll find CW, where you'll find FT8, where you'll find RIDI, FT4, PSK, automatic control data stations, and then beacons. Please don't transmit on the beacon frequencies. They're there for you to listen to. And if you're transmitting, you'll interfere with other people listening for the beacons. Now, I mentioned 10 technician phone privileges are 28.3 to 28.499, single sideband only. I have a couple frequencies here. You might want to check out 1010 nets on 28.380 or QRP calling frequency. Now, if you're a general advanced, you have more phone privileges you can use all the way from 28.3 to 28.899. Above that, you'll find AM, FM, and FM repeaters. Operating on HF is a lot different to making a contact through your local repeater. So some good operating techniques for HF: know your radio, know how to use the controls, know what RIT is, how to use that, know what operating split is, and understand the syntax of typical contacts. What do people say on HF? What are you going to answer? Understand timing is very important. When people are calling CQ and there's a bunch of people calling, you need to respond at just the right time so you don't double with them, or so that people can hear you and come back to you. You need to know where and when to find stations. So understanding propagation. If you spend your late night hours right now on 10 meters, you're going to be very disappointed. But if you spend your daytime on 10 meters, you're going to be very proficient and get a lot of contacts. You can also monitor DX clusters, reverse beacon network for ideas on what bands are open at what times. When you're operating phone, I suggest you use standard NATO ITU phonetics on single sideband. You might have a cute set of phonetics you use on the local repeater that your friends know you by, but remember, you're talking to a much wider audience on HF that don't necessarily know you, may not speak English as the first language, and may be confused. Not too long ago, I was listening to a station on 10 meters. It was a W6. I'm sure he was running at least 100 watts. He was very strong. He was trying to work an FY station in French Guiana in South America. It took almost 2 minutes to complete the contact because he was giving non-standard phonetics and the station could not understand his call sign. As soon as he was done, I used my 5 watts and dropped in Kilo 8 Zulu Tango. He immediately came back to me, confirmed the contact, we were done. The difference wasn't because of my operating power or anything like that. It was because I was using standard phonetics and the other station was not. He was confusing the operator on the other end. I suggest you might want to have one alternative phonetic for your call sign, but choose it carefully. So if they get stuck and they can't figure out what the standard phonetic is, with Zulu, sometimes I'll say Zanzibar. But be especially wary that if you pick words that have that are not very conclusive for that piece of that letter, or are different in foreign languages. One of the worst things you can use for the letter S is Spain, because how do they spell their country in Spain? It starts with an E, guys. It doesn't start with an S. It's España. So it's just confusing to use non-standard phonetics. Also, know your grid square, your county, and your zone, CQ zone, ITU zone, etc. I have a piece of paper right here in the shack with all those written down, so I know immediately when a station asks me, I can give them that information. Remember, when you get on HF, you're going to be expanding your operating a lot, and people want to work your state, want to work your county, are interested in your zone, etc., etc. Remember, HF can cover long distances. It puts you in contacts with hams from other countries and regions that might have use different language, manners of speech, customs, etc. HF contacts are often with non or limited English speakers. Avoid colloquialisms and idioms. Here's how to find your information on your grid square, your zones, etc. I have a whole document on charts and maps. This has frequency and band privileges, considered operators guides, grid square maps, CQ zone maps. Here's a little chart for general class. It just shows you the general class privileges, so you don't need to look at the confusing chart. Here's one with just technician class. Here's maps that show grid squares, country prefixes, and other information. Here's one, the US, Canada. Here's a chart that just has all the ARRL and RAC sections for field day. So that you can get those. And when you click on these links, it'll just give you access to each of these resources. So here's the one that I made up for field day. This has one side with the sections based on the number in the call sign. So all the number 1 sections, their section name, and the section abbreviation. On the other second sheet, it has them all the same things, but it has them now alphabetically. So alphabetical by the name of the section and then the abbreviations. By the way, if you did not hear, Greater Toronto area is changed. It's now GH. It's the Great Horn of Toronto area. So GH instead of GTA. Getting in the rhythm can be especially helpful on HF. And this involves a couple things. The first one is you want to respond where the station is listening, not necessarily where they're calling. Sometimes on HF, you'll hear stations say up or occasionally down, and they might give a number after that. That means they're operating split. They don't want you to transmit on their transmitting frequency. They want you to transmit 5 kilohertz up from there. And this is very common, or 1 kilohertz up. So you need to figure out where they're listening, and then you want to transmit there. Now, other stations might be operating simplex, so you want to zero beat them, but occasionally they might be answering stations that are higher and lower in frequency. So you want to match the stations that the CQing station is replying to. You want to be on the same frequency as the stations they're coming back to. Match the speed of the station, both CW or phone-wise. Which stations is he answering? Is he answering stations that are calling high, calling low? Is he answering first callers, late callers, double callers, tail enders? So figure out the rhythm of the contacts and get into that rhythm. It's a lot like merging onto a highway at high speeds. If you're operating CW, a smooth sending rhythm can be very helpful to attract contacts and consistency in sending. And here's that little chart here. Merging onto the highway, you want to be at the right speed at the right time and just fit in there smoothly and get noticed by the other station and responded to. The rhyme portion is knowing the things you're going to say in a typical contact, like know your exchange if it's a contest or what you're going to tell the other station. Know the order and format stations are expecting you to send information. Use standard phonetics or the best effective phonetics for the case. In voice context, don't say oh, say 0. In addition, knowing the Q codes is important. Now, you'll see the Q codes used a lot on HF, mostly on CW, but sometimes on phone. Here's a link that has a number of different Q symbols on it. There's a bunch of them. This is just a fraction, but really, when it comes down to it, hams use about a dozen of these. So make sure you know the ones that are popular and used all the time. So on this list, QRL is this frequency in use, QRM, a man-made interference, QRN, atmospheric, QRO, increasing power, QRP, lowering power, QRQ, sending faster, QRS, sending slower, QRT means you're going to stop, QRX means you're going to pause, et cetera, et cetera. There's also abbreviations mostly used on CW. I won't go into those right now, but there's a whole list of that. And then I have the number 8 in 14 languages. Well, if you're not an 8 call district, then don't worry about that. I actually have them numbers in 13 languages, all the way through the ones that you would use for your call sign, all the way up to higher numbers. So again, English, Spanish, French, etc. I only have the numbers because you're going to still use the same phonetics that you're using, but you might want to include the number in a foreign language if they're having trouble pulling your number out. So here's a simple casual contact on HF. CQ, CQ, Kilo 8 Zulu Tango, Kilo 8 Zulu Tango, and Station B answers, Kilo 8 Zulu Tango, Whiskey 1 Alpha Delta. Whiskey 1 Alpha Delta, thanks for the call. You're 5'9" in Stowe, Ohio. Name is Anthony. Roger, fine business, Anthony. You're 5'7" in St. Albans, Vermont. Name is Bob. Roger, Bob. Rig here is a Elecraft K3S running 5 watts. Antenna is a 3-element Yagi at 50 feet. 5 business on your QRP. Rig here is an ICOM 7300 with 100 watts to a dipole. Thanks for the QSO, Bob. 73 W1AD from K8ZT. 73 Anthony K8ZT W1AD. That's just a typical quick. It's not just an exchange, but it's a little bit of contact, but it's not a big long rag chew. But notice the beginning phonetics are used here, but after we know the call signs, we don't need to keep using the phonetics. So down here when they're signing off, they did not need to use the phonetics. They knew each other's call signs. Now, a lot of times the question is, especially during contests and quick contacts with DX stations, did they copy me? And am I ready to go ahead? And if you hear any of these things, either on CW or phone, that means they probably didn't copy you. So on CW, if they send a question mark, that means they probably didn't copy you. On phone, if they say call sign, that means they don't know your call sign, and they might say call with a question mark on CW. Again, repeat either the abbreviation or the full words on phone. Number or NR with a question mark means they're missing a number in the exchange, usually the serial number, but it could also be your section, your grid square number or your CQ zone number or whatever. They might ask for portions of the exchange in a contest, or they might say before dupe, which means they think you've previously worked in that particular contest. This is, again, a contesting thing. Nil on CW or not in the log means that they didn't copy you, and don't bother putting them in your log because they didn't copy you and they're not going to put you in their log. That means they just weren't able to pull you up. Later or sorry means, I'm sorry, I'm not able to contact you right now. Maybe try a little bit later. Conditions may change. Now, if they did copy, you're going to get something like a TU on CW or a thank you, R or RR on CW, or a Roger or Roger on phone, a QSL, a 73, an okay, yes, or other affirmative, or in a fast-paced exchange, they might not say anything. Everything went really smoothly, and they just start calling QRZ for the next station. I particularly don't like this mode of operation because it's just so easy to send a quick TU on CW or a thank you on phone, and then go on so the person knows that you were copied. What things did you discuss? Here's a wide variety of things you might want to think about discussing on HF. Very similar to what you might discuss on the local repeater. But remember, you're talking to people that might be in a different country, different area, have different ways of talking about things. So some of the things that are appropriate for the local repeater might not be appropriate for discussion on HF. Some things I definitely suggest you avoid: politics, religion, controversial topics. Anything you would not feel comfortable discussing with your grandmother or your children, I would suggest you don't discuss on HF. topics that are sensitive to the country or region of a DX station you're talking to. Be aware that things that might not be insulting to someone in your own country could be very insulting to a person in another country. Items that are not age appropriate for younger operators, use of slurs, pejoratives, derogatory terms, or hate speech, all should be avoided. Here's 3 resources. You can go and see the slideshow or watch the video of my presentations on how to make that QSO, get in the rhythm, know the rhyme, and dance the dance. Successful operating tools for assessing performance. These are tools that you can tell how well your station is doing. Things you can listen to, such as reverse beacon network, online software-defined radios to see how your signal is sounding at other places, and some top secret techniques for worked all states and your first 100 countries for DXCC. One of the great ways to make contacts on HF is to be active during contest. Even if you're not interested in the competition aspect of the contest, operating during contest means that there's a lot of potential contacts. Other stations are highly motivated to work you because you are points for them. There's a wide variety of contests with different bands, modes, DX, states, etc. So think about working contests, even if you're not going to send in a log, and even if you're not worried about the competition. All you need to do is be able to give the station their exchange that they need from you in return for the contact. So contact contests are very quick and short. So CQ contest, Kilo 3 Lima Radio, Kilo 8 Zulu Tango, K8ZT 59 Tim WPA, 59 Owl, that's the name I use when I'm contesting, Ohio. Thank you, QRZ K3LR. He went on to the next station. On CW, CQ tests, K3LR, K8ZT, K8ZT 599, Tim WPA 599, 5NN, Owl, Ohio, TU, QRZ, K3LR. Real quick, no extra information. No, please copy my exchange. No, please, my call sign is, my state is, etc. You can keep it very short like this. And by the way, if you contest where you need your name, you're welcome to use a shorter name. You don't have to use your real name. As long as you're consistent with your name throughout the contest, that's fine. You can even change your name from each contest to contest, but not during the middle of the contest. I detest Tony and I won't use it, and Anthony's too long, so I use my initials, AL, and everyone thinks it's Al as in Alan, but it's actually my initials. If you're not that familiar with contesting, I have a whole slideshow introduction to amateur radio contesting and a video recording. I did this for RATPAC about, I think, last August. I can't remember exactly when I did this. There's also a class you can take that I wrote for the ARRL. It's Introduction to Amateur Radio Contesting. It's 5 or 6 modules, and you get a PDF suitable for leather binding that you can provide your own leather binding and print out the PDF if you'd like. Here's some other resources on contesting from ND3N, the YouTubers Bunch, Dave Kassler, and Ham Radio Contesting. And I'll give you I'll break the mystery here on Dave's. Must I submit a contest log if I make contacts in a contest? No, you don't have to. It won't hurt the other station. Get in, make contacts. If you're not interested in entering the contest, you don't need to. But you do need to know the proper exchange to give them so they'll get points. 1010 International was founded in 1962 as the 10 net of Southern California. It became worldwide after that. The purpose was to promote activity and good operating practice on the 10-meter band, especially during periods of low sunspot activity. By 1975, there were 10,000 members, and the world internationally crept into the name. There now have been over 75,000 1010 numbers issued throughout the world. Mine is 44561. And they have a website with more information. You can exchange 1010 numbers with each other, chase paper and other awards. It's a great organization, so consider taking a look at that. 10-meter CW and data. Remember I said you can operate data on 10 meters. Here's the band plan. Just be aware that these modes are all available there. Don't transmit on the beacon areas. If you're interested in operating CW and you're not that familiar with it, I have a whole slideshow called Fun with Morris that talks about ways to get your license. I have 2 ways that I really suggest in there, and take a look at my slideshow for more information on getting involved with Morse code. You don't need to be an expert to make contacts, especially with a DX station or with a contest where you're talking about something very simple. Remember when we were talking about this contest exchange here, very, very simple exchange. After I copy his call sign, if I'm not interested in the contest, I don't worry about the rest of it. I just worry that he was able to get my information. When we're talking about 10-meter single sideband, a couple of the things you have to keep in mind. Even though you have privileges from 28.3 to 28.5, you don't want to transmit at 28.5 because you'll be outside the band. Remember, it is a single sideband signal and it will extend beyond that. So I suggest you only go up to 28.496 on your radio dial, and I'll show you why in the next slide. We have tuned our radio to 28.496. Here's where our radio says we're at. But notice, because we're using upper sideband, you don't see a lower sideband signal like we would an AM or lower sideband. We see an upper signal sideband, but notice what happens. It extends all the way up to 28.4990. We leave a little bit of extra here in case our dial is not properly calibrated, but you never want to go above 28.4960 on 10 meter if you're a technician, because your signal will extend into the other part of the band. Also, remember, when you're operating phone on other bands where it's lower sideband, you want to make sure you're not you're not at the bottom limit where you would extend over out of the band. If you're not used to tuning in single sideband, it may take a little practice. It sounds a lot like Donald Duck. Unlike FM, single sideband is not channelized, so you don't tune exactly to .000. You might be anywhere along the band. Here's a very good presentation by Ward Silver about single sideband. Tips for new HF operators from Dave Kassler, and a thing about using the 7300 for single sideband voice from AC3DS, and information on using the FTDX10 and the FTDX5000 from N4HNH. These are all real good resources for learning about tuning in single sideband signals. 10-meter FM, if you're a general class or higher, you can use 10-meter FM. Here's the frequencies that you can use for the repeaters. Most of the repeaters have a negative offset, and because they are global, they almost all use CT/CSS tones, so they won't accidentally be triggered by another station trying to access a repeater in a different location. There's also simplex FM frequencies, and here's where you can use a radio that's a VHF, UHF, 10-meter, 6-meter combo, like the Yaesu 8900, which is now discontinued, or the TYT 8900, which is very much a clone of that radio in a lot of respects. This has 10-meter FM on it. It's not usable for single sideband, so you can't use this for technician class single sideband, but it does have FM on it. And there are repeaters, and there's also simplex frequency sections where you want to operate. Simplex 10-meter FM worldwide calling frequency is 29.6, and there's been a lot of worldwide activity on that. Please move off the calling frequency after you made a contact, and if you want to keep chatting with people. 29.30 is common frequency to find JA hams on, and British hams can be found at 29.4 to 29.5. So FM simplex, when the sunspot cycles are great, is a fun way to make contacts. 10-meter AM. AM activity is between 29.0 and 29.2. During the height of the CB boom, many hams converted 23-channel CBs to 10-meter AM. Of course, they had to be able to use them in their privileges, and general class and above can use AM. Most modern amateur radio multiband transceivers have AM capability, FM capability, often lower, but in addition to the single sideband CW. 10-meter mobile activity is very convenient on all the bands because of the smaller size of the antennas. Many use mag mount and mobile CB antennas that have been retuned. Ham sticks or other ham specific antennas are also available. There have even been some handheld HTs that have 10-meter single sideband capability. I don't know whether this one's currently being produced, but you can find them used. Now, you might say, I don't have an HF radio at all. I don't have an antenna outside, but I'd like to hear what's going on these bands on HF. So I have two links here for information on worldwide tunable online software-defined radios. And the second one here is the one I'm going to use. The first one is a whole presentation on this, but the second one is a 4-page guide that I use with students in schools. You can use this to easily get started with software-defined tunable receivers. And I'll put the link in the chat. Okay. but this is mainly the web SDRs and the Kiwis. You can click on any of these links, go out to these websites, and you'll find when you go to this one, there's over 100 receivers around the world that you can use. You simply find the one you want to use, click on the information, and you can tune the radios there. Let's pick one. Let's see, what do we want to pick here? Well, we'll just pick the ones in Europe right now because the band's going to be dead there. Here, we'll go to the Northern Utah site. The Northern Utah site is interesting because it actually has multiple radios you can pick based on which frequencies you want to use and which antennas you want to use. So this one we'll just pick right here. We'll jump on to 10 meters and see whether we can hear anyone on that. So here's the radio, and now we're hearing signals on that band. I can turn this up a little bit. But we can take this and double click anywhere on here. So you get a tunable radio with a great antenna anywhere that you want to pick from one of these stations. It's a great thing to give a kid, or if you don't have HF yourself and you want to start listening, or you want to listen to your signal remotely, you could tune in a clear frequency and transmit here. I could hear what I sound like in Utah on 10 meters. I could record it and then play it back and listen to myself. So there's more information here, some basic information on how to use them. Here's how to use the Kiwis, some other resources besides those main two, some commercial radios because kids don't know how to tune in radios. So I have commercial radio stations they can listen to here, some stuff on SWLing, frequency charts. I also provide clusters so they can find stations, then go look for them on the band to tune them in, and information on which bands to choose for, which frequencies to choose for amateur radio, time of day, whether it's a night band, daytime band, and some notes on each one. So this is something I use a lot when I'm working with students or student groups, schools, Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, etc. It's something I can give them real quickly, and they can even do this on their phone. They don't need to have a computer even to do this. I have a listing here of a program that Dennis Kidder, W6DQ, and I did for the RATPAC last fall. We have 3 weeks of recorded videos on HF, the bands operating, making contacts, equipment, and antennas, and putting it all together. We have a slideshow for all 3 weeks. You can watch all of these recordings online for more information and getting started on HF. I have 3 videos here on 10 meters. I'm not going to play them now, but they talk about the 10-meter band from 3 different YouTube resources. And we're at the end of our presentation. Again, here's the link for the show. I'm going to copy the link and put it in the chat. This will get you access to this presentation, or you can shoot the QR code if you'd like. And I'll go ahead and take questions in 1 second. Just my contact information. And also, if you're interested, this is a link to all my presentations. If your local club or organization would like a presentation, I'd be happy to do one. I've done over 325 for different clubs around the world since the beginning of the pandemic. So again, here's the QR code you can shoot, or here's the link you can use, and I'll go ahead and stop and take questions. I'm going to go ahead and minimize this. I didn't get an answer on 10 meters earlier, but we'll try calling this station in New Zealand right now. This is FT8 on the 10-meter band, and we'll leave that running in the background while I take questions. So let me take a look at the chat first here. I really need a digital mode for amateur radio's dummy book. Gene, watch the video I put together on FT8 and FT4 with a lot of information there. Yes, a lot of stations mistake my Sierra as kilo. Who knows? I tend to use sugar instead. That's probably okay. Sierra is one of the more difficult ones, and I have a little chart actually of which letters get busted the most on phone. So some of them are more problematic. I know I had Kilo Alpha 8 is my original call sign, and the Kilo Alpha combination with an 8 was very difficult, especially for the Japanese stations. Kiwi SDR has a useful map of their stations. Yes, you can do that. And also what's also included recently is I use the VE3 SUN a DX cluster monitor. And when I right click on these, in most cases, I can also listen on a Kiwi SDR by just clicking on the link right in here. So it's a quick way to listen to the station without actually tuning my radio to it. So I'll go ahead and stop my screen sharing. Looks like the station in New Zealand hasn't came back to me yet. Any questions, please raise your hand or type them in the chat.
I used, when somebody says the band's dead, it drives me up the wall. I actually, I think it was in 2000. I can show you the certificate. I think it's 2017 when everybody was saying the bands are all dead and everything. I used 10 meters, and I actually got 8th in the world and number 1 in our area 7 from the 1010 International. And I used those beacons is how I did it. I listened for them, tune them in, leave the radio running in the radio room. And when I could hear the beacons, I'd come into the radio room and I would operate. And that's how I did what I did. I got those certificates. You want to see them.
Well, that's okay. I believe you. And I understand because I use FT8 and FT4 as propagation tools also, and they're always on the shack. And even during the periods of very low sunspot activity, I'm still making consistently 10 meter and 6 meter contacts that people don't realize. So the bands are not really as dead. Now, once the bands kick up like they are right now and people start calling, then of course, magically the bands are really alive because people are out there trying and calling CQ. So don't think a band is dead until you call CQ a few times, listen for other people. So yes, it's
yeah, the only thing I can add to that is that, yeah, if you're not calling CQ on them frequencies, you'll never know if it's alive or dead.
Okay. The station on, I'm sorry, Dave, when I was doing the SDR, I probably didn't have the volume up well enough for you guys to hear it coming through my microphone because my noise canceling was probably cutting it out. Barry's asking what time it is in New Zealand. I think, Barry, that it is about 5 in the evening, if I remember right. I'm not positive on that. Someone's got to tell me the exact time in New Zealand right now. Okay, other questions? Please raise your physical hand or raise your Zoom paw. Okay, other questions?
Well, on FT8,
yes,
waterfall, and you got all these signals coming down. You also know that you got odds and evens that you can click on for transmitting on one or the other. So looking at the waterfall, which is which and how do you know what to do?
Okay, let me just show real quick here. So right now, the problem is I'm transmitting, so I'm only going to hear people on the odd because I'm transmitting on the even. So I'm going to turn off my transmit here. I'm going to halt my transmit and I'm going to find a empty spot. So the trick is you want to find an empty spot where no one's calling. Of course, he calls me immediately as soon as I stop. So let me finish calling him. I just double clicked on, no one was calling on my frequency. So I'm calling him, but you want to find an empty spot. And that's what I did. I found an empty spot to call. He's actually down here. I was calling up here because there was a clear spot. You don't want to call on top of the other station. You want to find an empty spot so they can hear you. That's one of the differences with operating FT8 and FT4. You want to find an empty spot. And as far as calling even or odd, either one is fine. You want to do what the opposite of the other station is doing. The only band that there's really a set protocol on is 6 meters. On 6 meters, you're supposed to call on the even if you're calling to the west of where you're at. And if you're calling to the east, you're supposed to call on the odd. But otherwise, it doesn't matter. So unless it's the DX station that's operating Foxhound or something like that, where they're always going to be on the even, it doesn't matter. So I was calling on the even there when I did that contact. Now, I'm not transmitting right now. And you see, I still have an empty, I'm still clear here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to switch one thing. I'm going to switch the odd and I'm going to enable CQ. So I'll start calling CQ in the background. So it really doesn't matter if you're on even or odd, unless it's a DX station that's only working even, then of course you want to be on odd, but you want to be on the opposite time. So right now I just see right here, I'm going to double click on this station. I'm still calling on the odd. It's W2DUS USU, which is in Fiji. Let's twist the antenna just a little bit because it's not quite the same as New Zealand. And again, this is pretty late in the day for me for these stations. Now you notice someone's right up here next to me, but they're not right on my frequency. He just called 73. He just sent a 73. Notice I start calling while he was busy because I'm not calling on his frequency. He's actually transmitting down here. I'm transmitting up here.
How do you know they're odd or even?
Because whatever I have here, if I'm transmitting, I'll only see the other group. So right now he's even. See, he's on the the O. So 0 and 30 are even. 15 and 45 are odd. So I'm transmitting on the 45 and on the 15. He's transmitting on the 30 and on the 0.
Okay.
Now he came back to the VK5 instead of me, but I'm still going to keep calling here, and I might get through. So we'll let that sit there for a while. I'll see if there's other questions. 23027E N. It's N3X.
Gene, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Gene.
Okay, that's no problem. Gene here in Killeen, Texas, November 3 X-ray uniform Sierra. I have been very fortunate to be able to work 10 meters single sideband pretty much all over the world on between 50 and 70 watts out on a slider vertical antenna. The only areas I have not been able to reach have been Asia and Russia. Now, normally in the past, my contacts were centered around like the late morning hours, early afternoon hours. So I don't know if it's a time difference.
Yeah, you're going to want it for the Asian stations. You're going to want to get on early evening. That's the time you start getting the JAs and the Chinese stations. And you notice right now I'm getting South Pacific, so I'm getting the Fiji, the VKs, etc. For the Russian stations, if you want to work the European Russians, as soon as the band opens in the morning is when you want to catch them. If you want to work the Siberian stations, the UA0s, UA9s, late evening is the time that you're going to work those, most likely to work them.
All right, I had a feeling that was going to be the case, but I just, because I've reached East European all the way up to pretty much the Russian border. And it seems to be the block right there.
Yeah, what we're seeing is, 10 meters will be beginning a good amount of sunspot activity, but it isn't quite where it could be. If we really start getting hit, then we'll start seeing it being open 24 hours a day. Right now in my area, pretty much by midnight, it's closing down, and it's not opening until about 8 or 9 in the morning.
All right, thanks a lot. I appreciate
you're
your
welcome.
input.
Other questions?
Thank you, Gene. Anybody else got the,
Yeah, and Dave said he contacted Russia on 10 meter FT8 in the early afternoon, about 2 p.m. his local time. That would be that's probably fine. The MUF was pretty high. That's why it was possible that late.
this has been a great presentation, and I appreciate all the work you put into your slides and information you made available to us.
Well, I have one special request from you. If you have a station up with 10 meters and you know someone who's not been on yet, invite them over on a contest weekend. Not so much the contest, but the contest weekend means there'll be a lot of activity, especially a 10 meter single sideband. Invite a local tech or a recently licensed tech over to your house and get them on the air. I put together something called get a local ham on 10 meters near you or something like that I put out on Twitter and at our Facebook site for RATPAC before the CQ, the ARRL DX single sideband contest a couple weeks ago, suggesting people get on because there'll be a lot of activity. But yeah, try and take that shy person in your club and give them a chance to work some DX and see their eyes light up.
I actually go the other way around. I think I'll go over to Polly's place. She's not shy. She just needs the antenna raised. So I'll go over to her place, help her raise the antenna, and then we'll have fun on 10 meters.
That's a good idea. By the way, I'm using the calendar I'm using is called the WA7 BNM contest calendar. And this is what it looks like. And you can go in and look at the 8 days. You can look at a month. You can look at 12-month perpetual calendar, or you can just look for a specific contest you want. So the Russian DX contest will be coming up. It gives you the information on what type of contest it is. This is a worldwide contest. What modes it is being operated, what bands are being operated, categories you can enter under, power levels, and then also what the exchange is. So as a US station, we send a RST plus a serial exchange. The Russian stations will be sending an RST plus their 2-character oblast abbreviation.
Okay,
And
what
this
is that
is one
calendar
where,
called again?
what's that?
Well, I'm sorry. What is that calendar called again?
It's WA. I'll put the link in the chat here. It's WA7BNM contest calendar, and I'll put the link right here in the chat for this. I also have a whole slideshow presentation just on this calendar and on the W's on his other website, the 3830 contest rumors site. Let me get the chat here.
Not a problem.
I'm also putting in the chat my tiny.cc/K8ZT K8ZT-P. That'll get you to all my presentations. This is what it looks like. It's a whole spreadsheet. There's a bunch of beginners information. Here's the 10-meter one tonight. You notice there's not a recording, but there will be soon because we're doing the recording tonight. But there's also information here on contesting. And this is the WA7BNM contest calendar. You can go to this site and review my presentation on it. Or you can view the combination presentation I did on that site and the 3830 site. I have information on CW, DXing, field day, FT8, FT4, food, general information, interviews, logging software, operating, QRP, portable, SDRs, software, State QSO Party Challenge, station setup, tech licensees, youth, etc. And if your local club would like a presentation, feel free to email me. My email address is at the bottom of this.
Okay, I like to comment as far as any of these, what Anthony's doing, the Zoom RATPAC stuff, all these things are available to your clubs. It's, often if you're in a small community, you don't have all the resources for presentations locally. Use ours. That's what they're there for. You download them and use them. And we're glad to give you information on how to get to where you want to go with them. But there's a lot of information. You don't have to have a huge resource of people to talk to you.
Just a reminder, if you're not already subscribed to our mailing list, go to the ratpac.us website. Join any or all of our 3 mailing groups, or also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter, follow us on Facebook, or just access our list of presentations, and you'll get notified if you join any of these groups of when we're going to be having presentations. Also, please feel free to share this with your friends and let them know about RATPAC. So again, we have a whole YouTube channel. There's over 270 YouTubes you can watch on that from previous sessions.
If you have a Facebook, or your club has a Facebook or a website or whatever, put that information up there so all your members have access to it. Well, I certainly want to thank you for the presentation you did tonight, Anthony. It's been a good one, a very good one.
I don't have anything else unless anyone else has any more questions. I'd be happy to try and answer any questions you have.
Well, we can wrap this up. It's been a very good presentation. We'll have another one tomorrow. We'll have another one on Wednesday and Thursday and so forth. We've been doing this for nearly, I think, over 3 years now. And we're on a roll. We hope to keep going. Okay, Gene, he's waving his hand bye-bye. Okay, so with that, unless there's any comments, suggestions, whatever, speak now, or I'm going to close this down.